On a busy morning of July 18, 1925, you walk into a German bookstore. The clerk in the counter greets you as you go closer and closer in. You skim through the shelves. Fiction, poem, art, fantasy. Nothing interests you, but as you go closer and closer into the end of the store, you see a dusty book that piques your interest. At first glance, it looks ordinary. Very ordinary. But as you read through the pages, you can't help but to tremble out of fear. You lose control of your hands. The book drops. You stand there, realizing you just witnessed the start of an evil ideology which would almost end the world. This is the dark history of fascism. November 11, 1918. This date marked the first signs of fascism. The world takes a sigh of relief as the most devastating war in history has just ended. The total casualties? 40 million, and the collapse of two empires. At the time, it was known as the Great War, but we know it as World War I today. The Great War had two factors that made it so much different from the rest. One factor is that previously, before World War I, people were more patriotic to their states than to their country. However, this changed as people united together with an immense amount of national pride in the early 19th century. Another factor to mention is the military expansion of the nations involved. It became common for nations to expand their power by taking over other nations' territories. This may seem kind of ordinary, and yes, you are right. But what happens when you mix overbearing military domination with extreme nationalism, to the point of racist violence? To understand, we must go to Europe in the early 1900s. After the defeat in the Great War, Germany faced significant political and economic challenges. Initially, they were burdened with paying approximately 132 billion gold marks in reparations. Their military was restricted to only 100,000 troops. These conditions shattered the nation's confidence and led to the collapse of the German government. To put it into perspective, $1 at the time was worth 4.2 trillion German marks. Germany was in a massive crisis, and someone needed to step up. The Weimar Republic was the first to do so. They valued democracy and modeled their government style on the US and UK. However, due to political instability, assassination attempts, and lack of popular support, the party quickly disbanded in 1933. The Communist Party of Germany offered another alternative for the future of Germany. However, due to internal division and failed uprisings, it also lost support and was disbanded soon after. The German National People's Party was seen as the next successor. They looked promising and were mainly supported by middle-class conservatives and rural workers. In the end, it still failed as it couldn't adapt to the political and economic landscape of Germany. Loss of popular support, financial issues, and political instability all left a power vacuum that needed to be filled. But who was it going to be? Approximately 650 miles away, on the shores of Europe, a man named Benito Mussolini was making a name for himself in Italy. Italy, too, was dealing with major political and financial issues post-World War I. So, in 1919, Mussolini led the first fascist party, beginning with the foundation of the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento. The basic frameworks of fascism consists of extreme national pride, expansion of power through military conquests, and a single-ruled government usually run by a cult-like personality. With this new ideology solidified, Mussolini quickly took over Italy in 1922, marking the start of fascist Italy. While Mussolini was making a name for himself in Italy, another young German man found himself in a prison cell with only a few papers and a pen. Inspired by Mussolini, this man began to write. His name was Adolf Hitler, and what he wrote would become one of history's most infamous manifestos, Mein Kampf. This book would alter the course of history and nearly bring humanity to its end. The power vacuum in Germany was sealed, and so was the fate of humanity. In 1924, Adolf Hitler was released from prison, and it didn't take long before he was appointed chancellor. However, German fascism was a bit different. While it shared the core principles of Mussolini's ideology, it had a distinct and terrifying focus: racism. Hitler and his followers believed in the supremacy of the German race and promoted an ideology rooted in anti-Semitism and racial hierarchy. Unlike Mussolini's focus on national pride and military conquest, Hitler's fascism was deeply intertwined with a genocidal mission. In 1936, Italy, led by Mussolini, and Germany, led by Hitler, formed the Rome-Berlin Axis, marking the alliance between Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. Japan, inspired by fascism, also rose to power in Asia during this time. The world was in a chokehold as fascist power grew rapidly. In Europe, excluding Russia, fascist regimes occupied approximately 70% of the continent. Previous powerhouses like France and the Philippines were destroyed within days. Families were slaughtered in masses as Europe watched, paralyzed and helpless. Alone stood Great Britain, witnessing the monster that is fascism obliterate all of Europe, and knowing their time would soon come too. No one could help. The USA was too occupied with its own issues, while Russia's alliance with Germany sealed the continent's fate. Was this humanity's end? Had the limits of mankind reached their breaking point? Or would this be a testimony to humans' overwhelming resilience against adversity? We would never know the answer to that, because the beast that is fascism eventually began to devour itself. Like poetry, fascism became its own downfall. As I previously mentioned, fascist regimes are intensely nationalistic and expand their power through military conquest. This aggressive expansion allowed fascism to grow to what it was, but it also sowed the seeds of its downfall. On June 22, 1941, Germany made a fatal mistake that would cost them everything. Germany launched a campaign against Russia, with whom they had previously allied with. Russia, also known as the Soviet Union at the time, was one of the most powerful nations in the world. The alliance with the Soviet Union had allowed Germany to dominate Europe without facing a true adversary. But now, Germany had to confront that formidable opponent directly. Inspired by fascism, Imperial Japan made a similar error. On December 7, 1941, Japan provoked the powerhouse that was the US through the attacks on Pearl Harbor. The alliance formed between the US, Great Britain, and Russia proved to be too powerful to deal with. Perhaps, if Germany and Japan had not provoked the wrong nations, or if they had waited longer before attacking, the outcome might have been different. As Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto put it, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." In 1943, Italy would surrender. In 1945, Germany and Japan would surrender. The war on fascism had ended, or so did people thought. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that fascism could have literally destroyed the world. One different move, one less mistake, or one event might have completely altered the course of modern history. Fascism is immensely dangerous and complex. It imposes on individual freedom, manipulates public opinion to maintain control, and uses racial or national superiority as an excuse to conquer. This video isn't intended to dissect or denounce the many aspects of fascism, because that would be pointless, as it is far too complex. Fascism is misused, overused, and deeply misunderstood in our modern generation. And like all concepts, it will make a return in the future. It is naive and blind to assume that fascism has simply just ended. But for us thinkers, who understand the dangers and history of fascism, it is our job to keep it away from our future systems as much as possible. Thank you for watching all the way through.
Know your way.